first episode of the John Hickok Show. So if you guys saw that that Hickok 45 and Son video that I did with the Liberty Dolls, the last Gun Culture Radio episode, as you should know by now. If you don't, go watch that video. And basically, you know, like I kind of rehashed what I said in that one for those who didn't see it. I debated a long time about whether to keep that show going, or what to do with it and everything, and finally just decided I wanted to kind of kill that show, let it be what it was, and just completely start fresh with something new. And you might be thinking, well, this doesn't seem very new. This is just this is you talking for however long. It's like the same old shit, you know. But it's gonna be different though. Basically, I wanted to have a show where I'm not limited in basically almost any way. That's why it's over here on the John Hickok channel. You know, like I don't have to cut out, you know, curse words or whatever. It's not going to be a totally family-friendly show, but that doesn't mean it's going to be vulgar either. At the same time, you know, I'm not going to like over-exaggerate how much I cuss. I mean, just because I can. You know, I'm just going to talk how I normally would. You know, if you ran into me somewhere at a bar or wherever, I'm just going to, you know, talk how I normally would. Just like I do in videos, except, you know, I filter myself a little bit, of course. You know, when I'm doing stuff that you know, I want, that is kind of a Hickok 45 branded type of thing, because, you know, we try to keep everything family friendly, even though we, other than that, we'd stay true to ourselves and who we are and everything. So this will be just kind of a not as family friendly show, but it's not going to be like, you know, really vulgar or anything. And you'll be able to tell too by what guest I have on or what's going on. You know, if you still want to like be able to listen to it around your kids or whatever, you know, just maybe use more caution. But again, it's not going to become like some crazy, you know, X-rated show or anything like that. You know, but you know, just to be aware of that. So yeah, here it is. This is the first episode. Basically, I'm just going to kind of talk to you guys about some things. You'll have a guest, obviously. It's just going to be me, and the show's going to kind of evolve. You know, this. You know, I didn't. You know, I didn't want to just like, you know, have this big production and put this whole thing together and have this big rollout or whatever. Just, you know, just kind of in spirit. There'll be burps. You know, unedited burps. That's another bonus you guys will get. Probably got that on the old show too, but. Yeah, I just want to be myself, and I'm just going to let the show evolve. I'm just going to let it be what it is. It's called the John Hickok Show. You know, that basically leaves it open to about anything. And, you know, those of you that know me and stuff, you know, you'll kind of know what to expect. Derek is still going to do the show, as far as I understand. I'm going to have him on a lot and have different guests and stuff. And don't quote me on this yet, but I'd like to do things beyond just podcasts. One reason I wanted to call it the John Hickok Show instead of some kind of podcast name is because I like to leave it open to do some other things, some more like blog type stuff, you know, where you're actually going out into the streets and doing different things, and you know, and you know, doing stuff that's not just in the studio. Which, speaking of that, I'm actually going to be moving again soon. Jesus, I've lived in like so many different places over the past 10 years of my life for various reasons. But I'm moving again into a place that's, you know, not quite as nice as this one. You know, I did just go through a divorce, a pretty awful divorce, very awful. And but the studio is going to be better. Actually, it's going to be. I think it'll be the best studio when I get it done. You know, it'll take me some time to get it all set up and everything. But by the time I get it done, I think it'll probably be the best one. There's some really cool natural aesthetics in there. It's kind of like a basement, and it's going to be pretty neat. It's not as large as that one I had at the other house, but I didn't even take full advantage of that anyways. And that room was kind of like, I don't know, it was just sort of awkwardly sized. You know, the first studio that I had where I did a lot of episodes with the sandbag wall and everything, like it was a bonus room in one of those like real suburby style houses, and it was over a garage. I don't know if you guys have ever lived in a house like that where they've got a bonus room over the garage, but the walls were, you know, kind of like it was like being in an attic almost, you know. So it was a big room, but it's kind of a weird room. I don't know. It was a nice place. That was a good studio for sure. This one this studio, I feel like, it's much closer to that one I had before when I first started the podcast, because it's basically just a bedroom, so it's much more cramped. But it's a lot cooler than that one for sure. That first one I had, got the sandbag wall, of course, and got some other, like you've seen some of the few episodes I've done in here. Got the little like camo net thing back there, and got the old "They Live We Sleep" banner up. It's a cool studio. I like it because of everything I've been going through the past year. With the divorce and everything, and I haven't done a lot of podcasts in here. Just haven't had the energy. Just mostly doing a lot of just self-maintenance. You can call me a wimp if you want to. I honestly don't care. You don't know what I went through, but I'm telling you, it was difficult, and it wasn't because people seem to think in that video that it was because I missed my wife or whatever. That wasn't the part. That wasn't the part that was hard. Those of you who have been through an awful divorce, you just can't be prepared for it. You think you know how it's going to go, and you basically, like, if you're going through a divorce, I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now, you got to just forget who you think that the person that you're married to is. You just have to, because you don't know what to expect. You don't know what's going to happen. There are some people who have had good experiences when they got a divorce. It was amicable and everything like that. But sometimes I can't get into specifics about mine. But I'm just telling you, I don't care how good you think someone is or how much you think you know them. There's there's no limit to how crazy things can get. So, it was a rough time, but for the most part, it's over. I'm getting everything back together. Been kind of, trying to, kind of carve out the different things I've got going on in my life. Of course, number one is Hickok 45. That's my job. That's my career. That's my main goal and mission in life, professionally, of course, and starting to do more with the videos on the main channel and everything, and that's of course very important to me. Something I could have done a long time ago, but didn't want to for some reason. You guys have heard that story. So that's important, and then there's the extra kind of bonus content or whatever, as I call it sometimes, with the Hickok 45 and Son channel and the John Hickok channel now, and all the different things and all the different series and shows and different things that I've tried or whatever, and I was trying to kind of consolidate it and figure out exactly what I want to do and all that kind of stuff, and I kind of come to the conclusion that basically I'm going to, like I said, I'm move the podcast over here, so it's a little bit easier to do, and it's more open and free, and it can be a little more organic this way. And then on Hickok 45 and Son, I'm going to continue doing, gun videos, but I want to try to get away from doing things that are too much like something you would just do on the main channel. Because at first, when I wasn't doing videos on the main channel, that was like a place for me to do kind of like gun videos, but I wasn't really trying to do reviews per se. I was just sort of, doing, very casual type of gun videos, mostly shooting and stuff. And, but I'm going to try to, do stuff that's a little bit more original and unique, stuff that you wouldn't see on the main channel. Otherwise, it's kind of like, well, why would I just do something that I could just do on the main channel? So it needs to be kind of different. So that'll really challenge my creativity. Like you may have seen the Nerf gun video, stuff like that. Not all Nerf gun reviews, but I'm gonna do some more creative stuff hopefully over there. We'll see how that goes. And then of course stand-up. I basically, I started doing stand-up almost 3 years ago. As I'm recording this, it's I don't know what day it is. It's almost August, and and I started in late August, early September. It might have been like one of the last few days of August, something like that, or first few days of September of 2015. So I've been doing it for almost 3 years now. Really went great guns my first year. Really just busted my ass and worked really hard at it. And then after that, I kind of wavered a little bit, and I got back into it for a while, hardcore. And then like I want to say by the second year, I kind of, you know, when wife was pregnant and everything with my son, I sort of kind of quit doing it. You know, I got to where I was only doing it like, you know, I was going out like once a month or something, which is not enough, you know, to of course get better at doing stand-up. It was enough to kind of keep, you know, one toe in the door, you know, so I didn't just completely forget everything I learned. But then everything happened, you know, with the divorce and all that, and I just, you know, I was doing stand-up a little bit right away when that happened, and then I was just, I don't know, it wasn't really making me feel better. I didn't really want to be around people or anything, so I quit. So I kind of started to come back and then didn't for a few months. But here in the past, like maybe 5 months, something like that, toward the end of, you know, before the divorce was final, I started really, you know, hitting it hard again, and it just kind of reminded myself of why I wanted to do it in the first place. And it's just something that I really love doing, and it's something I'm going to be focusing, you know, a fair amount of attention on, because I really enjoy it. It's very difficult. It's a very difficult thing to do. You know, writing material is very hard, but I enjoy it and I love it. It's just, you know, it's unparalleled. And if I'm being honest, you know, one of the things that attracts me to it is, you know, because of, you know, how all of this went down with the YouTube thing. The nice thing about it is, you know, I know of course what I've contributed to Hickok 45 and the impact that I've had and everything like that. But the nice thing about stand-up is, you know, no one can say, oh, your dad just, you know, opened that door for you or whatever. You know, it's all me. You know, so any success or anything that I gained from that, it was something that I did, you know, 100%. And that's one of the attractions to it for a lot of people, because almost anything, you know, there's a lot of other people involved in creating something, you know, whether it's a sports team or a band or whatever it is. You know, it's kind of hard to say. You know, it's like, oh, you know, people can always naysay and be like, oh, well, if you didn't have this guy, then you couldn't have, you know, if Jordan didn't have Scottie Pippen, he would never would have, you know, people can always say that stuff. But what's cool about stand-up is it's just like, either you're funny or you're not, and, you know, no one can take that away from you. But now, of course, in your career, you know, there are times where you get breaks and different things because people kind of take you under their wing, or they, you know, throw you on a show, or like, I know a big thing that'll happen for comedians sometimes is a really successful comedian will see a guy who's just starting out and they just really like him for some reason, and then he'll take him on the road, and that's like a huge deal, you know, and that happens. So that can, you know, there are things, of course, that can happen that accelerate your career, but, you know, to a certain point, you know, you're either good or you're not. Now, of course, you know, when you're starting out, you know, everyone sucks, and then you gradually get better, but there eventually comes a point where it's like, hey, you got it or you don't, you know. So anyways, said all that to say that, you know, coming back to life, getting things going here again, excited about all this new stuff, you know, adjusting to my new life and everything, and you know, there's good and bad with everything, but I'm, you know, focusing on the good, and, you know, I'm excited about it. So, all right, there you go. That's enough about me. You know, I don't mean to talk about myself too much, because, you know, I'm pretty boring dude, but there's some things I kind of wanted to, you know, talk about in this show. Also, I will say that one of the ways I'm going to do this show is before I go live, or before I record or whatever. This isn't live. I don't know if you noticed or not, but this isn't live. And I'm going to post on Instagram. Not Facebook, just Instagram. I'm still using Facebook some, but I'm getting to where I like Instagram a lot better, because you just don't, I don't know, there's less noise on there. You know, you have more. Jesus. All right. Well, what I just realized was that I forgot to turn on the recorder. I'm using kind of a bare bones setup here, because the studio has been in just like total disarray for the past several months. And hang on one second. Yeah, okay. So we've got audio from the camera, and so the beginning of this show is just going to be camera audio, and now we've got audio from the microphone. Look, you know, it's part of it. Growing pains, you know. We're going to do this stuff. Okay, what was I saying? before I was rudely interrupted by my past mistakes. Story of my life. I was talking about something about, oh yeah, Instagram. So I've gotten to where I like Instagram better than Facebook because there's less noise and stuff. It's mostly photos, I don't know. It just seems less crazy, and I like it better. So I've been using Instagram more. My Instagram account or handle or whatever you want to call it is John, John, spell my name with an H, _ Hickok 45, just spelled normal like Hickok 45, HICKOK 45. So John, JOHN _ Hickok 45, HICKOK 45. That's how you find me on Instagram. You can also just search John Hickok, and that should bring it up too. But what I'm going to do is post a picture instead of, because of how everything started with Hickok 45. It kind of, this part of it was by accident with everything being kind of low production, just because it was the early days of YouTube, and I didn't know how to edit videos or anything about cameras. I didn't know any of that stuff. So it was all very just kind of simple production. And then we felt like people kind of liked that about what we were doing. So once we had the ability to get better equipment and stuff and raise the production values of our videos, we just kind of decided not to. We got better cameras over the years, but we still just stuck with kind of a basic video camera like the one I'm using right now. And just because, because sort of our thing. And also it's YouTube. It's sort of the spirit of YouTube. I mean, Matt from Demolition Ranch, you guys know how big his channel is. I've seen the camera he uses. It's like a $400 little Sony pocket camera. So production values are overrated to a certain extent, but in the spirit of that, because that's kind of like my style, and I like that kind of stuff. Basically what I'm going to do is every show is I'm going to write the John Hickok Show and what episode it is just on something random, and take a picture of it or put it in front of the camera at the beginning of the video, and I'll post a picture of that on Instagram. And then when you see that, ask your questions and suggestions, whatever, and I'm not going to reply to any of those like actually on the post, but ask those, and I'll probably I'll answer some of them. Just kind of depends on how many there are and what they are and everything. But at the end of the show, before I close it, I'm going to answer some of those questions. So eventually I may do some of these live. Like I said, the show's going to evolve. So we'll see where it goes. But for now, I think that'd be kind of a cool thing to do, because that way I can talk about. It'd be a way I can talk about some of the things that you guys care about, and there may be some where I want to make it a big part of the show. I may see one and because it's a big question, I want to make it a big part of the show, or I might want to wait and do another show or something like that. But anyways, so keep an eye out for that on Instagram. Okay, so I think I've covered all of that kind of stuff that I was going to cover. I mean, I'll probably think of something later that I forgot. But one of the first things I want to talk about on this show was because it's something that I've been thinking about lately. Because I've seen a lot of videos and different things that have been shared about it, and just, I don't know, it's been kind of on my mind, and that's the whole issue of patriotism. And I kind of wanted to kind of pose some questions about that. Like, for example, I'll start with this. There was a video that I shared on Facebook that I saw where there was a kid. I think it happened a long time ago because I'd seen it before. But there was this kid. It was like a quick video from a cell phone or something in a classroom, and they were saying the pledge, and there was this kid who was protesting it and was sitting in his chair, and then this other kid came over and kicked the chair out from under him, and you can't really hear what they're saying, or can't hear much about it, but the kid's wearing an American flag t-shirt or whatever, and it was posted by some conservative Facebook thing or whatever, and they were acting like, oh, look at this is awesome. This hipster kid, gets what he deserves, or whatever. And I had some real problems with that. I mean, sure, it's just very disrespectful to not stand for the pledge. You've got the conspiracy theory angle of it, of like, oh, the pledge is, government propaganda, they're brainwashing us and blah, blah, and all this kind of stuff. And, I don't really buy that. I mean, it's just, it's just a nice little ritual to show respect for the country that we live in. It's not perfect, obviously, But it's pretty good. It's been pretty good to us. You know, we can all, I think, admit that it's been pretty good to most of us, and it's getting better all the time, I think. So it's a nice little ritual that we do. You know, if I was in a situation where, you know, they wanted us to say the pledge or something in my job, I would absolutely do it, and not even you know, feel bad about it, even though I know about some things that I don't like that the government does. But with that being said, if someone feels like, you know, they don't want to respect the pledge, they feel like, you know, their beliefs keeps them from being able to do that with a clear conscience, then I think they should absolutely, you know, do that. Sit down. I mean, that's a very nonviolent way to protest it. I don't think that, you know, that's being weak or anything like that. I mean, it takes strength to do stuff like that, you know, because everybody is going to look at you like you're a wimp or an idiot or whatever, all sorts of hateful things. So it takes, you know, some courage to do that, you know, and even though I don't agree with that decision, I respect people's ability to do that. You know, I respect that. And then even beyond that, you know, this kid was actually using violence. I mean, the kid was sitting in his chair. I mean, yeah, the kid was fine, didn't get hurt, but he was being aggressive toward this kid for disagreeing with something he believes in. I mean, that's not America. That's not the America that I at least understand. And people will, you know, say that, oh, you know, the veterans, you know, fought and died for. Hang on one second. Okay. I'm like I'm paranoid right now about all the technical stuff. I was like, did I even turn that camera on? Okay, it is recording. I had the viewer flipped around because sometimes, like, if you're filming yourself and you got sometimes you have to, you don't have a choice, you know, especially if you're walking with the camera like the vloggers and stuff do. But sometimes if you have that viewer flipped around, the tendency is to look at the viewer instead of the camera lens, and it always just looks weird when you watch the video. It's like, you know, they're just looking like, see, look, I'll look at it right now and talk to you. Hi, how you doing? What's going on? What do you guys think? So it's kind of weird, you know, and you can't help but your eyes just like kind of drawn to it, you know. Anyways, okay, everything is good. I'll get back to what I was saying. So they'll say, you know, veterans, you know, fought and died, you know, for this country. How dare you disrespect the flag or the pledge or whatever? And I understand that. I understand that sentiment. Absolutely. Absolutely understand that. But I would disagree that is what they fought and died for. I would say that they fought and died for the ability to make your own choice about how you want to handle something like the pledge. You know, that's the point that's what I would say. You know, you might disagree with that, but, you know, America's about freedom. It's not about agreeing with America. You know what I mean? You know, so that's kind of where I stand on that. I don't know. I hate to see, you know, issues like that tear people apart, you know, and I think sometimes patriotism it's like crammed down people's throats, you know, to a certain extent. You know, I feel like if you love this country, then express it and don't feel any shame for doing that. But, you know, trying to shame other people for not having those same feelings as you or not wanting to express it in the same way as you, to me, is a very anti-American thing to do, you know. Now, where this changes, of course, is, you know, you've got the other huge issue that's been a big deal the past, whatever, 2 or 3 years, is you got the whole NFL issue. Right? Now, with that gets even more complicated because you're talking about a private organization. And, you know, you have these players that are representing, you know, your team and the NFL and you as an owner, you know, in a lot of ways. So, you know, I've said, you know, for a long time with that shouldn't even have been an issue. You know, the NFL, it was frustrating that the NFL waffled so much on that. You know, I think what the NFL should have done, with all, you might be surprised by this with all that I just said, but I think the NFL should have said, we respect your right to protest, but these are the rules in our league. If you want to play in our league, then you stand for the national anthem. If you have a problem with that, then you can find another league to play for. You know, I think that's what they should. I think that's what they should have done. I mean, these guys, they want to use their notoriety to protest. Great. I mean, that's one of the great things about having notoriety is you can do stuff like that, but not while you're on someone else's dime, unless they want you to. I mean, if the NFL had said, sure, protest away, then okay. You know, I don't think that would have been the right decision. I think it sends a bad message. You go to a game and, you know, half the players are kneeling and the other half are standing up. I mean, that's just like, you know, what's going on here, you know? And they eventually came to some kind of, you know, half measure where it's like, you know, you can stay in the locker room or whatever. Like, I don't know. I don't even think they should have done that. I mean, I think they should have just said, hey, you know, we're an American company. You know, we have made this part of the ritual of the, you know, the ceremony of the game starting, the national anthem. You stand for the national anthem if you're going to play in the NFL. I mean, I think that's how it should have been done. We don't care what, you know, if you want to protest it or whatever on your own time, you know, fine. But, you know, and even then, I mean, if you're an NFL player, you're representing that team and everything. So if you have an NFL player that's coming out and saying a lot of like really anti-American things or things that you don't agree with as an owner or owner of the league or whatever, you know, you don't have to continue to employ that person. You know, but then you've got the public, you know, to think about too. If a lot of people are really upset that these players aren't able to protest and they just stop going to the games, well, you know, that puts them in a tough spot too. So, I mean, I get how it was a difficult situation, but they let it go on too long. You know, that's just how the media works these days. You know, they get a hold of something, they're just going to run it into the ground, you know. So if you become part of a scandal or something like that, or some kind of situation, you've got to just nip it in the bud right away, take care of it, and then be done with it, you know, and not give the media something to hang on to, you know. But I don't know, it's just crazy. But yeah, that's kind of my thing on patriotism. I think it's great. You know, I am proud to be in this country. I think it's a great country, despite all the issues that it has. But I think the issues that it has are partly because of the fact that it's great. You know what I mean? That's the thing. You know, they don't have some of these issues in places like Dubai, you know, because you just have to do what they say, you know. That's the thing. And, you know, we're a very diverse country. There's a lot of different types of people here, you know, so there's going to be some growing pains, and, you know, and America is still growing. It's not even that old. That's a thing to remember. I feel like people forget that really easily. Like, we haven't been around forever, you know. We've only been in a handful of wars. We've been around a couple hundred years. I mean, it seems like a long time because of technology and the way everything is advanced and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, you're talking about just a handful of lifetimes that this country has been around. I mean, long lifetimes, you know, of course, but it's new. We're still learning stuff, you know, we're still figuring it out. So, you know, try not to be too hard on America, even though they irritate me sometimes. I like talking about a country like it's a person. That's another thing too, people forget, I think, is there's a lot of people in charge of making this whole thing work. You know, people put too much on the president. You know, I feel like there's so much going on. I mean, there's so many moving parts in anything big, any really big organization. This is something that I really started to learn as, you know, got involved with this stuff. You know, getting more involved in the business and everything. Like big organizations are slow to move. I mean, you've got a lot of people involved in all these different decisions. You know, it's like, oh, I like it, but let's see what this guy says, and blah blah blah. And it just has to keep moving up the ladder, and it's got to come back down the ladder, and then back up the ladder, and it just, you know, there's communication problems, and, you know, it's just, the bigger something gets, the more of a mess it becomes. So it's amazing that our system works as well as it does, and I think that's largely in part, you know, to the founders, you know, because, My theory is that the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and all that stuff, especially the Constitution, I don't think that it originated with America. I feel like it's something that's been around for a long time, that probably has been revised some and everything. That's been kind of a working document. No telling how old it is, but it's pretty good. I'll say that. It's definitely pretty good, but I don't think America was the first country to ever use it, the first nation to use it. That's just my theory. But anyways, that's kind of how I feel about that. I don't want to, I know people have strong opinions about the NFL thing and patriotism and all that kind of stuff. And all that stuff is great. I'd like to see people actually, exercising freedom as a freedom over patriotism. Does that make sense? I think freedom is more important than patriotism to a certain extent. I mean, someone attacks us, we got to go to war. That's different. You have to give up your freedom to save, the country. That's not what I mean, but just people shaming each other for not standing for the pledge or whatever. It's just, I don't know. I don't love that. And I think sometimes patriotism can become kind of a pissing contest. I feel like people try to out-patriot each other. And it's like, come on. America's not a cartoon, I mean, I don't know. I think sometimes it gets a little bit overdone. But yeah, I mean, I think this is still probably the greatest country on earth. And, until this shows otherwise, it's hard to beat. I'll say that. I mean, I haven't traveled around the world, but, I've heard from people who have that, and obviously seen, you never know, I guess, until you actually go to these places. You hear like people will claim that, France is like, oh, Americans are so delusional. They act like they live in the best country. France is so much better, and England, all these other places or whatever. But I don't know. When you really look into it, I don't think so. And also these places are really small. So yeah, maybe they do some things better just because they have less people. But the gun thing is what really tells the tale for me. America is really the only place where you can have access to weapons, firearms, guns, whatever you want to call them. That's the only place you have access to them like we do. So, what are these other places? If they're so much better, why are they afraid of their populations being armed? And I think that is one of the biggest symbols of a free country, and why it's so scary when these politicians want to try to take our guns from us. Because it's like, whoa, wait a minute. It's not only about, it is about the guns, but it's not only about the guns. It's about like, why? Okay, why are you afraid of us having these, So, I don't know. That's my take on it. Speaking of that, hold on. I got to drink some beer first. I'm going to try really hard not to edit these shows. You know what? I'm just not. I'm not going to edit them. It is what it is. It's in the raw. It's real. These solo shows are going to be, whatever. There's going to be like moments where I'm just like, okay, what was I going to talk about next? It's just going to be that way, because I'm by myself. I don't have someone else to feed off of or whatever. But a lot of them are going to be with guests. But I also don't want the show to rely on my ability to schedule a guest. So I'm going to do these solo ones like this too. And they are what they are. And I'm going to hopefully the show will, this is the first episode, so we'll see how it goes. That's what I'm trying to say. So there was something else I wanted to talk about that was sort of brought up in the comments on the video where I announced that I was going to be doing this. And because I made a statement in that video about how, I'm not the typical gun guy. and I sort of wanted a show where I could sort of reflect that a little bit, you know. And there's someone who I've seen comment a lot before, so he's a guy who really watches the videos. It wasn't just some troll that just ambled in or whatever, And he had an issue with me saying that, saying I was making a generalization and all that kind of stuff. So and I sort of responded to him a little bit, but I kind of held back because I wanted to, talk about it on this first episode and kind of see what you guys think about it and give some of my opinions on that matter. So obviously, when I said that, I'm not saying like I'm the only non-typical gun guy that's ever existed. I'm not saying anything like that. There's a lot of us. I know several of them that are not typical gun guys, but it doesn't change the fact that there is a typical gun guy. I've been around a lot of gun people, a lot of gun shows, talked to a lot of them on the internet, see them on the internet, gun shops and just known people randomly through friends or whatever. And people who are like really serious gun people, especially, there's a certain type, they tend to be conservative to a certain extent, because typically conservatives respect our right to the Second Amendment more so than liberals do, historically speaking. So they tend to be more conservative. Gun ownership, you think about it in general, it's kind of a conservative kind of thing. You're protecting yourself and your family. It's just conservative values sort of feed into it pretty naturally. And if you are someone who's more liberal, you have there's a lot more resistance, to being a gun owner, because you got the whole peace, love thing, and and I don't know, that was stupid, but you know what I mean. I mean, there's a lot more resistance to gun ownership if you're a liberal. Now, I'm not a conservative or a liberal, so that's not what I meant. I wasn't saying that I'm a liberal gun owner. I'm not a liberal for sure. But what I mean by that is that people who typically are into guns that you meet, they have kind of a conservative kind of lifestyle, for the most part, family, working class, kind of people, And I feel like just by pointing that out, people are going to be like, oh, what do you got against that? That's not at all what I'm saying. I mean, those are the very people that tend to be the most stable in society. Those are the ones that keep things running, But what I mean by not being the typical gun guy, I just mean that I'm just, I kind of have I don't always relate to that person, being into heavy metal and playing video games and just being a little bit more, it's a word that I'm searching for. I'm just not a conservative. That's the only way I know how to put it. And without getting too specific, I'm just not, and a lot of times I find that there's this, like, for example, when I had long hair, right? When I would go around to gun shops and stuff, people would look at me like, who the hell, what is this guy doing in here? Like, that's a good example. People, the typical gun guy, sometimes, they tend to, have a certain look about them, right? I look more like a gun guy now because I got a shaved head and a big beard and everything. But I've never like totally just fit in with that group per se. So that's what I meant when I said that or whatever. But there's a lot of us. There's a lot of I found there's a lot of gun people that are into heavy metal, which I think is really cool. There's a lot of more conservative people that can't stand heavy metal. They think it's like devil worship music or whatever, and it absolutely is not. That's not the point of it at all. It's like I always tell people, heavy metal is basically, in a nutshell, it's the music version of scary movies. It's really what it is, but on a much more like deeper intellectual kind of level. So yeah, that's all I meant by that. And when I say I'm not the typical, I'm not saying that like, oh, I'm like, the 1% of gun people, has different interests that are not typical of the typical conservative man. That's not what I'm saying at all. I mean, there's a lot of people who are, I've known lots of liberal gun owners. I've known lots of gun owners that you would just not suspect. And again, the reason you wouldn't suspect them is because there is a typical type of gun owner. you know, they dress a certain way. They're more just, it's hard to explain. I'm not trying to like offend anyone, but it's just, you know, go to a gun shop, go to a gun show, you know, go around on the streets and ask who has more than 10 guns. You know, I mean, there's gonna be some common themes there. You know, anyone who's been around a lot of gun people know that. So, so that's all I meant by that. I wasn't trying to offend anybody or anything like that. Which, you know, is easy to do these days. That's one of the things that's tough about the culture now, is there's no more benefit of the doubt. You know, people just do not give people benefit of the doubt anymore. Like never. And this is not a conservative liberal thing. This is like across the board. And I'm not just talking about people who are like, oh, triggered or whatever. I'm so tired of that word. Triggered and snowflake. Both of those are just, they're just crutches. I mean, it's like, I'm so tired of hearing those words. But people are looking for something to be offended by or to have a problem with, whatever, you know. And there's a lot, it's like, for example, like in our own community, with the Tim Kennedy interview, he said, for those of you who don't know, Tim Kennedy is I think Special Forces veteran. He's in some kind of either Ranger or Special Forces. I don't know a ton about him. I just know that he's a real deal, you know, veteran, combat veteran from Iraq and everything, and part of an elite unit of some sort, and was an MMA fighter for a while, and done some acting, I think, too. You know, kind of like a real life Captain America sort of dude, right? And you know, he's been on Joe Rogan a bunch of times, and you know, has a lot of people that really look up to him, understandably so. And he was on a podcast with Lance Armstrong, and which is cool. I didn't even know Lance Armstrong had a podcast, and I mean, not that I would necessarily listen to it, but kind of cool. He's an interesting character. It's a shame what everything happened with him and all that, but what was I going to say? So I'm rambling. God damn it. I knew this would happen. That's all right. We're going to power through it. So Tim Kennedy, he said some things that were not very friendly to the Second Amendment. I will agree. He was, all that stuff was going down, was like soon after the Parkland shooting, and he was talking about how he didn't think someone under 21 should be able to buy rifles when they were talking about that and changing the age restrictions and stuff. And he said that he said absolutely gun control is I can't remember the exact word he used, but it is an option, to prevent gun violence, right? So everybody immediately was just like, all right, fuck that guy. We don't want to, we're not going to deal with him anymore. Like, he's a FUD, he's a turncoat, and he's anti-gun and all this kind of stuff. Now, I was upset about it. I didn't like the things that he said. But I think it's kind of crazy that people go that far. I mean, he's probably, like, for example, Joe Rogan. He is probably much less pro-gun than Tim Kennedy is. But Joe Rogan has done some pretty amazing things for us gun owners by having Kolyan Noor on the show. And whenever guns come up, he usually will give kind of the pro-gun side of things. And he has such a massive audience that it doesn't really matter if he's as pro-gun as we are. Just the fact that he has such a massive following, and he's not just preaching to the choir. He has a following of, because he talks about psychedelics and all that kind of stuff, and alternative theories when it comes to history and science and religion and all that kind of stuff. So he has a lot of people, listening to his show that wouldn't necessarily be gun people. And he kind of puts that little bit, that pro-gun seed in people's mind. But I've heard him talk before. He's he's not as pro-gun as us. That's for sure. But people don't really get mad at him, because of it's just amazing what he has done for us or whatever. But with Tim Kennedy, it's like everyone assumed
that because he was a veteran and everything, that he was like this hardcore, super pro-gun guy to the full extent. And just because he wasn't quite as pro-gun as they had hoped he was, he is still pro-gun. I mean, he's a pro-gun guy. He was not saying that we should ban AR-15s. But just because he wasn't as pro-gun as we would like him to be, then all of a sudden it didn't matter that he's pro-gun at all. We just treat him just like he's anti-gun, and completely throw him under the bus. And that's what I mean by, like, we're not giving people the benefit of the doubt or any kind of leeway. It's just like, as soon as they even hint at something that we don't like, it's just like, oh, we're done with that person. That person is terrible, and that's something that I have a problem with, and that's a whole other, big issue with, people calling each other FUDs and all this kind of stuff. I mean, the word FUD almost doesn't have any meaning anymore, because it just gets thrown around, just willy-nilly by anybody who wants to use it to basically build themselves up by tearing down someone else. It's like, you're not as pro-gun as me. It's this big pissing contest, like what I was talking about with, patriotism. I'm more patriotic than you because, I wear American flag boxers, or whatever the hell, people say. And it's crazy. It really is. Like a FUD, what a FUD is supposed to mean, at least its original definition as I understood it, was basically someone who was just a sports shooter, like a hunter. Maybe they shoot trap, clay pigeons, whatever. And they own, bolt action rifles, maybe some shotguns, stuff like that. But, they typically vote Democrat, and they're not pro-gun. They don't think people should be allowed to have, AR-15, assault rifles, and things like that. They're called that's why they're called FUDs. And that's, I feel like someone maybe corrected me on this, but I always thought that a FUD, it came from Elmer Fudd, because he had a shotgun. But I feel like maybe there was another meaning for the word FUD. I don't know. But anyways, that's what I always, kind of saw as a FUD. But nowadays, people are calling you a FUD just because maybe you think that, I don't know, what's a mild gun control measure, like that if you don't, let's say you don't think that felons, should be able to have guns. Some people might call you a FUD for that, and there's a lot of people who think that, or like what Tim Kennedy said, maybe you don't think that someone should be able to have an AR-15 until they're 21. You'll definitely get called a FUD for that. Now I'm not saying I agree with these things, but I think it's ridiculous that we are basically like eating our own, throwing people under the bus just because they're not as pro-gun as we would like them to be. I mean, we all come from various different backgrounds. Just because we like guns doesn't necessarily mean we're going to agree on every little thing, and it's very important that we band together. We're lucky that things kind of quieted down after Parkland pretty quick, because I mean it was becoming a real zoo. It really was. It was just, it started with there's kind of the 1-2 punch of the Vegas thing and Parkland, and all that bump stock controversy, with the NRA and all that kind of stuff, and it just became this huge mess, and we were just completely unorganized and off balance. And if we had been hit with a really serious attack to our rights, legally and everything, I think that it might have done us in, because we were so separated at that time, and we still kind of are to a certain extent. I think people have just sort of calmed down a little bit, but that's a real problem. I don't like to see competition between the NRA and the GOA. It's become this like, oh, I'm on team GOA and they're on team NRA, and the NRA does this, and oh, but the GOA does this or whatever. And it's just like, it's ridiculous. It shouldn't be that way. I don't know. I hate to see all that stuff, but it's just kind of the way of the world now. Unfortunately, no one gives each other the benefit of the doubt. Everyone is super picky about everything, and we got to figure out, I don't like what that person said, so I'm just totally done with them, kind of attitude. And then another problem is social media sort of helps to facilitate all that stuff, because how do you get noticed on the internet, especially now where there's a million bajillion YouTube channels and a million Facebook pages, and just like everybody is trying to make it big on social media because people found out that it could be done. So everybody's trying to do it. Well, how do you get noticed? You have to have some kind of extreme, loud stance on something. You got to have a hard take on something. And you got to like pander like really hard to a very specific audience. Totally just sell your soul to your audience and just pander. Or have some kind of really extreme view on something, to get people to kind of notice what you're doing, So a lot of people are doing that kind of stuff at the expense of the Second Amendment, or that's true for other areas too, whatever they're doing, because they're just trying to get attention, And I'm afraid that some people are using the Second Amendment to just build up their own following, and they're not actually thinking the long game or thinking what's best for all of us and all of our rights. They're just worried about their own following and their own audience. So, maybe I'll get more viewers if I do this or blah, blah, or whatever. It's just, it's sad. And, I'd like to think that that's not the case, but, I don't know. It's very frustrating to see that kind of stuff and that kind of infighting happening. I don't want to get too much into the NRA thing because it's just like, and part of the problem with that is, I'm not in a position to speak on it too much because, we work with them. I mean, that's one of the reason that we have sponsors in the way that we do is because, we intentionally chose things that we don't review, right? So we never take anything from gun companies. We've said this a million times, but just so I can kind of explain this, I'll go back over it very quickly. We did take a few free guns. We took a few free guns, and then we decided that we weren't going to do that anymore. We made sure we only took them from like small manufacturers. That was sort of how we justified it. Like, well, if it's just some, mom and pop kind of, manufacturer or something, I guess we could do it because it's really not, competition with other gun companies and different things like that as much. But we took a few of those. Then we eventually decided, no, we're not going to do that anymore. But we definitely never took any money, absolutely never, from any gun companies. We never did any these rollout, like first look deals, never had any reps from gun companies come, and be in, videos with us or be there when we were filming a video or any kind of special treatment or anything like that. We took a handful of free guns from small companies, gun manufacturers in the early days. And we also did T&E. And like way back when, and because we didn't have a choice, but that's like you borrow it and then you send it back. So when we came time where it's like, hey, we're gonna do this full time, we gotta make some money. I mean, AdSense isn't gonna pay our bills, so what we decided was we were gonna take sponsorship from companies that we didn't review, something we wouldn't review, so we wouldn't have to worry about affecting our having a bias, basically, So, we thought, okay, ammo, Federal wants to work with us. All right, we're not going to review ammo. So we get all of our ammo from Federal, not a problem. SDI, well, we're not going to review gunsmithing schools, not a problem. The NRA, we're not going to review gun rights organizations, not a problem. Bud's Gun Shop, we're not going to review gun shops, not a problem, So, of course, now that the NRA, they've always been controversial, of course. I mean, they're the NRA. But now with all this kind of stuff, it's kind of like, well, shit. So, if I defend the NRA too much, it's like I'm reviewing the NRA, going against, what we said, we would do. It's kind of a weird, different situation. So that's why I kind of hold back some. It's not because I'm afraid. I mean, I'll talk with you all day about it. But I'll still say my opinion. With what we do with the NRA is, we do a membership drive where we basically promote them so that people will join the NRA. And we would never do anything that we don't believe in. That's the thing. We would never do anything that we don't believe in. We've always supported the NRA. And yes, they have flaws, but I support people joining them. I think that's important, to join the NRA. And if you don't like something they're doing, let them know. Vote when you can. So I feel very good about our deal with the NRA for however long we have it, and regardless of how long we work with them, we'll always, you know, unless they do something really crazy that I just, you know, can't foresee, you know, we'll promote joining the NRA. Not as often, of course, as we do now, you know, but when you go back and watch old videos, there's old videos where Dad has talked about the NRA and told people to join and stuff like that way back before we worked with them. So, you know, anything you do is gonna make a certain section of people upset. You know, that's why you can't worry about it too much, because I don't care what you're doing, and you're gonna make some people upset. And also, the bigger and more successful the thing that you're doing is, the more chances for making people upset, you know, you're gonna have. That's just the way it is. And that's kind of the deal with the NRA. They're big. You know, they step on people's toes. They say things we don't agree with sometimes. But you know, they're in there. They're in there. You know, having the political. I'll make sure I'm still recording over there. You know, they're in there in Washington. You know, they're entrenched. They've been doing it a long time. Again, I hate to see the competition between them and the GOA. I don't think it's real. It's not actually between the two organizations. I think it's just, you know, more in people's heads. But we need them all. We need all the gun rights organizations. But it bothers me that that issue has divided, you know, the gun community or the gun culture so much. You know, I really, really hate to see that. But, you know, it is what it is. You know, there's not a lot that, you know, Dad and I can do about it, other than just, you know, put our opinions out there. It's just, you know, it's just human nature. That's the thing, that no matter what, you can't escape. You can't escape human nature. There was somebody, it might have been Terrence McKenna. I can't remember if it was him or Alan Watts, or it's one of those type of philosophers. And I can't remember the exact quote. Can't remember anything. Yeah, not a lot to go on here. But it's something like, you know, technology. It's basically like he was trying to make the point that technology is moving faster than the human brain, you know, is capable of. Like, you know, we've evolved technologically much faster than our brains have. You know, so it doesn't matter how many shiny phones we have or whatever, you know, we still are kind of a victim of the operating system that we're stuck with in our mind. You know, I think that was the point he was making. Our mind's operating system evolves much slower than, you know, the things that we create in technology, something like that. And that's what you find in almost every system or community or group, whatever. It's like that unavoidable human nature factor is just there. You know, people have agendas and they're greedy and selfish, and, you know, or people that aren't, you know, don't exhibit those qualities, they get taken advantage of, and it's, you know, it's just, you know how it goes. But I basically, you know, I wish there was a way that, you know, we could kind of bring the gun community back together, but I think it's just gotten too big. But I will say, on a positive note, I think the fact that it's so big is a bigger deal than it being torn apart. You know what I mean? Because if something really big happened, like what we saw after Sandy Hook, where we've got, you know, an assault weapons ban like on the table going through Congress, you know, it's like looking serious, we'll be back together in no time. You know, that's just how it works, I think. So the most important thing for our gun rights, I truly believe the most important thing is our numbers, because when it comes down to it, we don't want to get our guns taken away. You know, it's hard to get people to go to rallies when the threat is nebulous, you know. But when the threat is real, it comes down to the numbers, and you know, we have bigger numbers than we ever have because of the internet. I think, you know, a combination of video games and the internet, like basically, you know, video games got this whole new generation into guns, first-person shooters, you know, GoldenEye, Call of Duty, all that stuff, got this whole new generation into guns. And then there was the internet to kind of facilitate that, you know, like the early YouTube channels, like us and Nothing Fancy and who else? Such was around in the early days, and you know, all the big YouTubers. And I don't mean just the early days, but you know, even just the past. Whatever, it's still happening right now. It's still happening. There's always people getting into guns from video games, and then they discover YouTube. So, you know, all the way from the first nut and fancy videos, all the way up till, you know, the most recent. I don't know what's a new YouTuber, or Paul Harrell or something. You know what I mean? So, it's a big deal, and you know, without all that happening, you know, we'd be in a very different position. But you know, we got the numbers now. I wish we were not as divided as we are, but like I said, having the numbers is the most important part of it, I think, to our gun rights. And you know, and that's another thing too I want to touch on is, you know, people used to give FPS Russia a really hard time for not talking about gun rights, you know, for not being political and all that kind of stuff. Now, I don't know if he actually, I mean, I don't know the guy. I've met him. I had one long conversation with him in like 2012 when he was first blowing up. And it was he wasn't blowing up, you know, literally, but his YouTube channel was. And we were at almost said when he was first blowing up at a machine gun shoot. This kind of sounds weird, but I was at a machine gun shoot. And the first time I'd met him, and hung out, you know, it was me, him, Dad, and Such, and we were like the only YouTubers there, and we hung out for most of the day or whatever, and talked to him for a long time. And but other than that, I've like, you know, ran into him a couple of times. Don't really know the guy, you know, very well, so I don't know if this was something he actually thought through or not. But I'm just using it as an example. People did give him a really hard time for not being more political, you know, back when his channel was more active and everything, especially like post Sandy Hook and all that. But I think he actually did more good by not talking about the Second Amendment, because if he was talking about it all the time, you got to think, you got a lot of kids and stuff that were watching his videos, of course, coming over from video games. I mean, he even made videos that were like, you know, about video games. You know, I mean, he was really just snagging up that entire market of, you know, all those kids playing video games, and they want to learn about real guns. You know, like he was the embodiment of that, you know, in so many ways. And if he started preaching about the Second Amendment, you know, those kids would have been like, what is this shit about? You know, this is lame or whatever. You know what I mean? It either wouldn't have done any good, or it would have, you know, turned people off, you know. So I think he actually did more good by just being like, hey, I'm just a cool guy with the, you know, that talks with a Russian accent and shoots guns, you know. And then it sort of, you know, planted that seed in people's heads. You know, if you beat down people's doors with the Second Amendment talk, let me teach you about our rights, son, kind of stuff, it can turn people off. You know, I think there's a time for that, but you know, I think it's almost more important to just kind of demonstrate. You know, not that he necessarily demonstrated responsible firearms use always. But I think just kind of showing that, you know, guns are normal and that they're fun and that they're accessible, and, you know, being responsible is an important part of that, or whatever, of course. But, you know, they're going to learn that hopefully if they decide they want to buy a gun, they go to a gun shop, you know, or they talk to someone or whatever, you know, hopefully. But just being exposed to people shooting guns on the internet, you know, has been huge for getting people into guns, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And you're not necessarily going to make as much progress by just making a bunch of videos and talking about the Second Amendment. You know, you're mostly going to preach to the choir. You're going to have a lot of people that already agree with you going, hell yeah, you know, good on you for doing that. But, you know, who's watching that shit and that actually is going to be convinced? I mean, like, if you don't believe in gun rights, you're not going to watch gun rights videos. You're just not. But you might watch a gun video. You might watch a guy, you know, blow up watermelons with a Desert Eagle. You might watch that, and then eventually over time, you're like, hey, maybe this isn't so bad, you know. So I don't know, it's just the way that I look at it. All right, so this has been like a long rambling. You know, that's kind of how probably the solo podcasts are going to go for the most part. But you know, it is what it is. You know, we'll see where this show goes. But the thing is, like, this is like a way. You know, I hope that this show will be better than Gun Culture Radio eventually over time. But that isn't, unfortunately, that wasn't necessarily my goal. Was to just, I was deciding between either just completely axing the whole concept of a podcast, or not, and I decided, well, this is a way that I can continue doing it. Putting it over here, whatever. I cussed a few times. I think knowing that I don't have to edit that stuff out is really nice. And and I can be more free and open to say what I want and stuff, and it'll make them much more easier to do and more fun to do, and I think that will in turn eventually make the show better, I think, but we'll see how it goes. So okay, we'll finish it up with reading some questions off of Instagram. We'll see what people say. All right, let's see what we got here. Pull it up. I'm sure we got a few good ones. All right, here we go. Let's see. Favorite Metallica album? It's definitely this drew a huge brain fart. Ride the Lightning. Jesus. Yeah, it's I've always, Ride the Lightning. I've for the past several years, that's always when people ask me that, it's absolutely Ride the Lightning. I feel like most people say Master of Puppets or And Justice for All, but the reason I like Ride the Lightning so much, versus all the other ones, is it was still had a very old school metal and thrashy kind of feel to it, but it was just it was this weird sweet spot where Master of Puppets, what's interesting, the reason Master of Puppets was so mind blowing is they were still a pretty young band, and they put out this album that sounded like, they've been playing together for 20 years or something. I mean, that album is amazing for the time. But, as just a listener without understanding the history and all the stuff that goes into it, Master of Puppets just sounds like a very professional, put together, and great album. Of course, but what I like about Ride the Lightning is it sounds like a very young, raw band, but yet but you can just hear the genius in it at the same time. Does that make any sense? It's just kind of that bridge of raw and them creating something new, but also you can just hear the greatness. You know what I mean? Anyways, I love Ride the Lightning. That's my favorite album. But I like a lot of this stuff. I even like the stuff that people don't like. I like Load and Reload. I even like some songs on Saint Anger. I mean, I don't care. I love Metallica. So, but that's my favorite one. Will Derek still appear? Yes, I believe that he will. I mean, he's another person, so he may decide he doesn't want to do it. There's nothing I can do about that. But I think that he will still appear on the show. So, let's see. If I had to pick one gun for an apocalypse, what would it be? Probably an AR. Well, yeah, probably an AR. I almost said AK maybe, but I don't know. It's just, I love AKs. They're reliable. It can't hurt them and everything. And there is that advantage in Apocalypse, but God, the AR is just so easy to use, and as long as you keep it clean, they tend to work pretty well. And also, I feel like in an Apocalypse, they're very common, just like an AK, and especially in America, you can find spare parts, ammo. If it's a standard 5.56, and they're just so pointable, and they're light, and just it's hard to beat. AR for sure is what I would do. Let's see what we got here. So when am I getting a Cowboys from Hell tattoo? I actually don't have any tattoos and don't plan on getting any tattoos. I don't know why. I've just never been, I feel like I seem like the guy that would get a tattoo, I don't have a job that would prevent me from getting one. I'm into heavy metal and stuff, but I don't know. I just don't care to get one for some reason. And what is my favorite 80s? Oh, what is your favorite 80s Pantera album? I haven't really listened to them enough, to be honest. I would guess the only one I've even listened to is Power Metal. This is something that people don't know, even that they like Pantera, is that Pantera started at the same time Metallica did. You know, we think of them as a 90s metal band because that's when they had all their, like, you know, it's when they were signed and they had all the, you know, their big hits and everything, and that's the Pantera that we know. They started in like 81, the same time Metallica did. They had a bunch of albums that were never like, you know, it's before they were signed with anybody. Like they had like 4. I think there was like 4 of them. But the last 80s album was Power Metal in 1988. And without really listening to a lot of them, I would guess it'd be that one because that one's the closest, I think, to like the later Pantera stuff. But I don't know. I haven't listened to them enough. How tall am I? I'm 6'8", 6'8". Dad and I are the same height. Do I prefer the Remington 870 or the Mossberg 500? Now, I would say that I prefer the 870 if it's an older one. You know, if it's pre-Freedom Group. If it's an old 870, I would prefer it over a 500. An old 870 versus a 590, that'd be a tough one because God, the 590 is just so hard to beat for a pump shotgun. But I just there's a special place in my heart for the 870, especially if it's an old one. Because I don't know, I love those, you know, all steel receiver, even though it doesn't necessarily matter. I don't know, there's something nice about it. What else? What do you find challenging? Let's see, hold on. Yeah, we'll do this one as the last one. What do I find challenging about being a stand-up comedian from the South nowadays? Okay, so first of all, I have to drink a beer. Well, take a drink of a beer. So first of all, I'm not a stand-up comedian. I'm what you would call, the term for what I am in regards to comedy is an open micer, which means that, you know, I'm an amateur and that I basically go to open mics. I might do the occasional show, but I'm not a comedian. To actually have the label comedian, that's another thing. This is a big question. I'm gonna answer it in a big way at least. And to be a comedian, you have to have done. Basically, you have to do stand-up professionally to be considered a comedian. It doesn't necessarily have to be your only form of income necessarily. Like, you know, someone who's been doing comedy for years and years and years could answer this probably better than me. But I would say that to be a comedian, you have to at least, you know, if you're traveling around pretty often and you're doing like real shows and you're getting paid, you know, and you're like hosting at real comedy clubs or opening for people, you know, and you're doing like real stuff, you know, as far as comedy, you may still have to have some other part-time job or whatever. You know, then you can call yourself a comedian. You don't have to be, you know, on Bill Burr's level or anything like that before you do that. But and you might be a real comedian, but you still do open mics occasionally. But I'm very much, I mean, that line is a little blurry, but I'm very much still in the open micer phase. And it's kind of like just like with guns, you know, there's a certain culture, and you don't call yourself a comedian if you're not a real comedian. You know, that's another thing that will piss off real comedians is actors that are like, there's a comedian and a comedic actor are two different things, you know. Like Jim Carrey, for example, he's a comedian because he started out doing stand-up. He's also a comedic actor. But like Jack Black is not a comedian because he didn't ever do stand-up, at least as far as I know. I mean, sorry, Jack, if I'm wrong on that, but as far as I understand, he never did stand-up. But if I'm wrong about that, you get what I mean as an example. So I just do open mics for now and shows occasionally, so I'm an open micer. But yeah, calling yourself a comedian if you're not, that's like a big faux pas in the comedy world. You know, maybe one day I'll get there, but for now I'm an open micer. So what's difficult about? I went through all that. I almost forgot his question. What do you say? What is difficult about? Oh yeah, nowadays being from the South and all that kind of stuff. Well, you know, at open mics, of course, you have, open mics are typically, your audience is going to be other comedians. So for the most part, they're a little bit more understanding, obviously, of jokes, because they write jokes and they understand jokes. They're a lot harder to offend, that's for sure. But if you have an audience as an open micer or like at some really local show or something like that, it's going to tend to be a more liberal audience, I would say in probably most comedy scenes, because, going to a local amateur comedy show is kind of a young person kind of thing to do, like a young hip kind of person thing to do, a lot of more middle-aged people or more conservative people are not as likely to do something like that for whatever reason. So it's kind of a weird double-edged sword. So because you got mostly comedians, they're less likely to be offended. But if you have a real audience there, they're more likely to be, younger, more liberal type people. So it kind of depends. It kind of depends on that. I've actually had a pretty good experience so far with there aren't really many jokes that I've done that are just really offended people. I don't have a lot of really crazy stuff. But I've told jokes about guns and different things that of course come across as me supporting guns or whatever, and people are pretty responsive to it. I mean, they understand that it's a joke and everything like that. So at least in my experience, I haven't really felt what other comedians have been talking about, as far as offending people or whatever. I think that a lot of that is not necessarily the audience that you're performing for where you have the problem. It's someone taking a video or someone telling someone, can you believe what this person said or whatever. It's the more famous comedians that really run into that problem. But as far as being an amateur, or even just if you're a real comedian but you're an unknown, going around, the people that come to those shows, they love comedy, so you're less likely to offend those people. So yeah, it hasn't been a big problem, big problem for me. And I think there's been a lot of backlash to that. A lot of people have been, Jerry Seinfeld has been great, and he's been very vocal publicly about that. How basically comedians should be able to, they're jokes. They should be able to say what they want, It's supposed to be a very free and open kind of art form, and all that. So yeah, to answer that question, haven't had any big problems with it or noticed anything weird. Going forward, maybe I will. But and with the comedy stuff, that's kind of a I know you guys have asked me about putting out more videos of my comedy and different things like that. It's kind of a tricky situation because I've got some stuff that I'd love to show you guys, but if I put it online, then I worked hard to develop it. So if I put it online, it's kind of like I'm sort of wasting it, in a certain extent. Because if I put all my good stuff online, then people are just going to watch it online. They're not going to come see me do it, and it's always better live, So now I might put some stuff out. Let's see. I'm trying to put together, kind of a really strong 8-minute set, but I've got some other things kind of hanging out there that I'm not sure what I'm going to do with. And if I get a good recording of something like that, then I may throw it up, throw it online. I'm trying to record my sets more, trying to get in the habit of doing that, because then, if there's something that's a throwaway, meaning that it kind of only worked in that moment and it's not something that I'm going to do again, that's perfect stuff for just throwing on the internet, So if I film more of my sets, then I'll have some of that stuff that I can put out, and and different things like that. But as I get my stuff more together, I'll let you guys know, if I'm going to be doing shows out of town or anything like that, But doing stand up is a very long process, and I'm committing a lot to it, but I can't commit as much to it as maybe some other people can, because I've got a lot of the stuff that I'm trying to do. But it takes a long time either way. A lot of comedians, they don't even start scratching the surface until they been doing it for 10 years, or something like that. It just takes a really long time, to develop material and to really hone your craft and, you know, find your voice, as they say, which is basically, you know, a way of saying like your delivery style. You know, so every comedian has kind of a way of talking, you know, on stage or whatever, and it takes a while to kind of develop that and find that. So it's a difficult thing, but it's really fun. I enjoy it. All right, well, you know, this show is what it is. You know, it's the first episode. We'll see how it goes, and yeah, I hope you guys got something out of it and enjoyed it or whatever. But if you guys have questions that you want me to answer or things you want me to talk about or whatever, look out for the Instagram posts. But you can also post questions and things like, you know, in the comments of this video. Now, I'm going to make this a podcast, but for now it's just going to be on YouTube. It's going to be kind of like with the old Gun Culture Radio. It's going to be a minute before I make it a podcast. I still have to figure out if I can like change the name of Gun Culture Radio on iTunes. I don't even know if I can do that yet. May have to just create a whole new one or something like that. I'm still going to figure all that out. So for now, it's just going to be on YouTube, and it'll just kind of expand as it goes on. But I'm glad to be able to, you know, still do something like this. I know there's people that really like the podcast, and, you know, get Derek out here, and we'll do some more shows, and excited about getting the new studio set up. I'll of course show you that when that happens and everything. But I appreciate you guys for, God, if you hung with me this long, you know, then there's really something wrong with you. But I really appreciate you guys. I really do. I can't say that enough. And I will see you guys on the next one.